Hey, it's Derek Hagan. I'm a financial therapist specializing in meaning and purpose and happiness. Here with another Money Health presentation where we're going to talk about good enough, being better than perfect. When we talk about being good enough and the pursuit of perfect, there's something called the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. And what this means is that 80% of the effect or 80% of the benefit, 80% of what you get comes from 20% of the effort, 20% of the resources, 20% of the money, the time, and so on. And this is powerful. What it means is that for just a little bit of effort, you get a lot of effect. You know, the first 20% of effort gets you 80% of the gain. This is a great spot to be. With 20% of the effort, you can get 80% of the benefit. You see this show up all over the place. 80% of a company's productivity comes from 20% of its employees, or 80% of the profits come from 20% of the customers. 80% of language comes from 20% of the words, and so on. 80% of sports or dance comes from 20% of the moves. It's powerful, and it's a big bang for your buck to learn this 20% because you can get 80% of the way there. Once you get that 80%, though, it becomes a different story because now you don't get that much extra benefit. That last 20% costs a lot of time, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of effort, costs a lot of resources, and so on. Now, when we think about personal finance, how do we apply this Pareto principle? Well, we need to think about people in terms of this bell curve. You've probably heard about this bell curve. Now, however you define people or split them up, they're going to kind of resemble a bell. In the middle of that bell is the average, and then most people cluster around the average, and out in what they call the tails, that's where you get the outliers. But the idea is that most people are average. Most people are in the middle of that bell curve. So we can use the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule to come up with rules of thumb for personal finance. We can come up with something that's good enough. Now, a rule of thumb is something that works pretty well for people in the middle of the bell curve. Now, a rule of thumb is different from one-size-fits-all advice because one-size-fits-all advice, first of all, doesn't exist. And second, a rule of thumb is telling you straight up, this may not work for everybody. This might not work for you. It might not work for me. But what we want to do is find that 80% solution, use a rule of thumb, and give up on our quest for perfection. By that I mean, most of us have been raised to chase perfect, to be the best, they say. Pick something and specialize. Be better than anybody. Be so good they can't ignore you, they say. Go after perfect. My view is that we should not be going after perfect. We should be looking for good enough. Because once we get to good enough, once we've spent that 20% of effort to get 80% of the effect, we can move on to something else. And we can spend another 20% to get 80% of something else. We should be good. We should be a little bit good at a lot of things. This includes personal finance. Now, with rules of thumb, it's important to recognize that what works for me might not work for you. That's okay. We need to recognize that. We need to recognize and acknowledge that up front. Okay, so with the rule of thumb, I might save 15% of my income, but you might save 10. Or maybe you've got a comfortable lifestyle and a high income and you're saving 30% of your income. It doesn't matter. Find something that works for you. Find your 80% solution that takes 20% of the resources. Call it good enough and go live your life. You get one life. Live intentionally.